I still remember the day my brother stopped talking to me. It wasn't loud. There were no fights, no shouting, no doors slamming, just silence. A quiet so sharp it could cut through the air. He looked at me once that morning, just one look, and then turned away. No words, no explanations, nothing. I waited for him to say something, maybe even just a simple goodbye, but he didn't. He walked past me like I was someone he barely knew. At first, I thought it was just one of those small misunderstandings siblings have. Maybe I'd said something wrong the night before, or maybe he was just tired, distracted, busy with life. I told myself, he'll call later. He always does, but that call never came. The next day passed, then another. I sent a message, just to check in. He didn't reply. I tried again, still nothing. That's when I started to feel it. The heaviness that sits quietly in your chest when something precious begins to fade away. I replayed our last conversation over and over again, searching for clues. Was it my tone, my words? Did I hurt him without realizing it? But no matter how hard I searched, I couldn't find the moment where everything went wrong. The strangest part was, there was no anger, just a hollow kind of silence, and somehow, that felt worse. Because when someone yells, at least you know they still care enough to feel something. But silence makes you question your worth. Every morning after that, I'd check my phone, hoping for his name to appear on the screen. Every evening, I'd think about sending one more message, just one, but I'd stop myself. I didn't want to seem desperate. I told myself I'd give him space, but deep down, I was afraid that maybe space was exactly what he wanted. Sometimes, I'd walk past the old park where we used to play as kids. I'd see brothers laughing together, pushing each other on the swings, sharing secrets, and I'd feel this ache inside me, the kind that only family can leave behind. I didn't tell anyone about what happened, not my friends, not even my aunt who often asked how he was doing. I just smiled and said, he's fine, because saying the truth that my brother no longer spoke to me felt too painful to admit. That day changed everything. It was the start of a silence that would stretch for years, a silence I never saw coming. Before that silence came between us, my brother and I were the closest two people could be. He was 3 years older than me, but he never made me feel small. He was my protector, my secret keeper, my best friend. When we were kids, we shared everything, toys, clothes, even food when there wasn't enough to go around. We grew up in a small house, the kind where every sound carried through the walls, and laughter could fill the whole place. I remember the nights we'd stay up whispering under the blanket, trying not to get caught by our parents. He used to tell me stories about superheroes, and I'd always imagine him as one. Life wasn't easy for us, but we had each other, and somehow that made everything feel possible. When I got scared of thunder, he'd hold my hand and say, "Don't worry, I'm here." And I believed him, because he always was. As we grew older, life started to pull us in different directions. He went off to college first, and I stayed home to help our parents. Still, he called every week. We'd talk about everything, work, life, dreams, and silly things that only siblings understand. When our parents passed away, the world suddenly felt emptier. It was just the two of us left, and we promised to stay close no matter what. I remember him saying, "We may lose everyone else, but we'll never lose each other." That promise meant everything to me. For years after that, we kept it. We spent holidays together, shared meals, and comforted each other through hard times. When he got married, I was genuinely happy for him. His wife was kind, soft-spoken, and I thought we'd all become one family. I wanted that, but slowly, things started to change. He became busier. Calls turned into short messages, and visits grew rare. I told myself it was normal. He had a new life, new responsibilities. Still, sometimes I'd catch myself missing those long conversations we used to have, where we'd talk until midnight about nothing and everything. There were moments when I'd pick up the phone to call him, then put it down again. I didn't want to seem like I was clinging, but in my heart, I just missed my brother, the one who used to laugh with me for hours over the smallest things. I never imagined that one day, all that laughter and warmth would be replaced by silence. I thought bonds like ours couldn't break. I thought love was enough. But maybe, sometimes, love alone isn't what keeps people together. The distance between us didn't happen overnight. It began quietly, almost unnoticeable at first. A missed call here, a late reply there, little things that I brushed aside, thinking, he must be busy. At first, I told myself not to worry. Life changes after marriage, and I understood that. He had his own responsibilities, his own family to care for. But slowly, I began to feel the difference. A small shift in his tone, a certain hesitation in his words. He still spoke kindly, but it wasn't the same warmth I had always known. Then came the misunderstandings. Small, silly things that somehow grew bigger than they should have. One day, during a family dinner, I said something about how I missed our late-night talks, how he was always too busy now. I meant it as a light-hearted joke, but his wife didn't take it that way. She went quiet, and the room felt heavier than before. Later that night, he called me. His voice was calm but distant. He said, "You shouldn't have said that. It embarrassed her." I apologized right away, explaining I didn't mean any harm, but something in his tone told me the damage was done. After that, things changed. He stopped visiting as often. When I called, his answers were short. When I tried to make plans, he always had an excuse. Still, I held on, believing it would pass, because that's what siblings do, right? We argue, we forgive, we move on. But this time, he didn't seem to want to move on. Months passed. Then, one afternoon, I went to drop off some homemade food at his house. A small gesture, something I'd always done. His wife opened the door, smiled politely, and said he wasn't home. But I could hear his voice inside. That moment stung in a way I can't explain. That when he finally called me back that evening, his words were simple, almost rehearsed. He said, "I think it's better if we keep some distance for a while." I didn't argue. I just sat there, holding the phone, trying to breathe through the ache in my chest. After we hung up, I kept staring at my reflection in the dark window, wondering how something so strong could break so quietly. I went to bed that night telling myself it was just temporary, that we'd talk it through, like we always did. But deep inside, a small voice whispered that maybe this time, things were different. A few months after that phone call, there was a small family gathering at our cousin's house. It had been a while since I'd seen my brother, and though part of me was nervous, another part was quietly hopeful. Maybe this would be the day we'd finally talk, clear the air, and bring things back to how they once were. I dressed carefully that morning, not to impress, but because I wanted to look like the sister he used to be proud of. As I walked into the house, my heart raced. The familiar laughter, the smell of food, the sound of children playing, everything reminded me of the old days. And then I saw him. He was standing near the garden, surrounded by a few relatives. His hair was a little grayer, his posture quieter, but he was still my brother. I took a deep breath, gathered all my courage, and walked toward him. "Hey," I said softly. He turned, met my eyes for a brief second, and then looked away, as if I was just another face in the crowd. He nodded politely, muttered something like "excuse me," and walked past me. I stood there frozen, my smile fading before it could even settle. The world around me blurred, voices turned faint, laughter faded. It felt like time had stopped, just long enough for my heart to break. I tried to hold it together. I sat quietly at the dining table, pretending to be busy with my food, but my hands trembled every time I lifted the spoon. A cousin asked if I was okay. I smiled and said, "I'm fine." It was the kind of lie you tell because the truth feels too heavy to say out loud. When I got home that evening, I didn't cry right away. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, hearing his voice in my head, the voice that once filled my days with laughter and care, and now, that same voice had turned into silence. Later that night, the tears finally came, not loud sobs, just quiet, steady ones that came from somewhere deep inside. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even disappointed. I was just empty. It's strange how a single moment can change everything. One look, one choice, one silence, and suddenly, a bond you thought could never break starts to fade like an old photograph. That was the day I realized my brother hadn't just stopped talking to me. He had walked away from the part of our lives we built together, and left me standing there, still waiting for him to come back. After that day, the silence between us became a part of my life. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and before I knew it, years had gone by. I wish I could say the pain faded with time, but silence has a way of echoing, especially when it comes from someone you love. At first, I tried to stay hopeful. I sent him messages on his birthday, on holidays, even small things like "saw this and thought of you." He never replied. Sometimes, I'd see that the message was read, and for a moment, I'd feel relief. At least he saw it. At least I wasn't completely invisible. But then, nothing. Just the same, endless quiet. People around me started to notice. My aunt once asked, "When was the last time you spoke to your brother?" I smiled and said, "It's been a while. He's busy." Busy. That word became my shield. It was easier to say than "he doesn't talk to me anymore." There were nights when I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what could have been so bad that it erased years of love and laughter. I thought about all our childhood memories, the times he held my hand when I was scared, the promises we made to never drift apart. It all felt like a dream that had ended too soon. Sometimes, I'd hear news about him through relatives, how his children were growing, how well he was doing at work. I was proud of him, truly, but hearing those updates from others instead of him, that was a quiet kind of pain. It's strange how you can miss someone who's still alive, how grief can exist even without a death. I kept hoping for a sign, maybe a message, a visit, even an accidental call. I imagined how it would go. He'd say hi, I'd say I've missed you, and just like that, everything would fall back into place. But that moment never came. Years passed, and I learned to live with it, or at least pretend to. I filled my days with work, with friends, with routines that kept me from thinking too much. But no matter what I did, there was always a part of me waiting for the sound of his voice, waiting for my brother to come back, because no matter how much time passes, you don't stop being someone's sister. You just learn to love them quietly from a distance they may never cross again. It happened on a quiet, rainy evening. I remember because the sound of the rain against my window was the only thing breaking the silence in the house. I had just finished dinner and was about to make a cup of tea when my phone began to ring. When I saw the name on the screen, my heart stopped. It was him, my brother. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. My hands trembled as I held the phone. Part of me was scared to answer, scared that it might be a mistake, or that hearing his voice after all these years would open up old wounds. But another part of me, the part that had been waiting all this time, couldn't let it go to voicemail. I took a deep breath and answered, "Hello." For a moment, there was only silence. Then I heard it, his voice, soft, uncertain, and trembling a little. He said my name. Just hearing him say it again made my eyes fill with tears. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have talked to you sooner." I didn't know what to say. The words caught in my throat. All I could manage was, "It's okay." But it wasn't just okay. It was everything I had wanted to hear for so long. He paused for a while, then continued, his voice breaking slightly. "There's no excuse. I was going through a lot. Things I didn't know how to explain. I thought staying away would make things easier, but it only made them worse." I could hear the rain outside, mixing with the sound of his voice. It felt almost poetic, like the world itself was crying with us. He told me he missed me, that he thought of me often, but pride and guilt kept him from reaching out. He said he'd been wanting to call for years, but every time he tried, he didn't know where to begin. I listened quietly, tears streaming down my face. I didn't need explanations. I didn't need apologies. I just needed to hear that he still cared, and he did. Before we hung up, he said softly, "Can we meet tomorrow?" And I said, without hesitation, yes. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, phone still in my hand, rain still falling outside. My heart felt lighter than it had in years. The silence that once separated us was finally broken, not with anger, not with blame, but with a single, fragile word, "Sorry." The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying his voice, his words, the sound of the rain blending with his apology. After so many years of silence, I was finally going to see my brother again. We decided to meet at a small cafe near our old neighborhood. It was the same place we used to stop by after school, back when a cup of tea and a shared pastry felt like the best meal in the world. As I walked there, every step felt heavier and lighter at the same time, heavy with memories, light with hope. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting by the window. For a moment, I just stood and looked at him. His hair was thinner, his face a little older, but he was still my brother, the same one who used to carry me on his shoulders, the same one who promised to never let go. He looked up and saw me. Our eyes met, and for a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, he stood. I could see the emotion in his eyes, guilt, relief, love, all tangled together. We didn't rush toward each other. There were no dramatic tears, no loud words, just two people who had been apart too long, standing face to face again. "Hi," I said softly. "Hi," he replied, his voice cracking just a little. We both smiled awkwardly at first, then genuinely. We sat down, and for a few minutes, We just talked about simple things, the weather, the coffee, the neighborhood. It was almost funny how ordinary it felt, considering how long we'd been silent. But maybe that's what healing looks like, not in big, perfect moments, but in small, quiet ones. After a while, he said, "I don't know how to make up for all the years I lost." I reached across the table and took his hand. "You just did," I said. He looked down, and I saw tears glistening in his eyes. I had waited so long for this, not just to see him, but to forgive him. And in that moment, I realized I already had. We spent hours there talking, laughing a little, remembering things we'd both tried to forget. The pain didn't disappear, but it softened. When we finally stood to leave, he hugged me. It wasn't a long hug, but it was enough. Enough to tell me that love had survived the silence. That day, I didn't just get my brother back, I got a piece of myself back too. It's been a few months since that day at the cafe. Sometimes, when I think back to those long years of silence, I still feel a small ache, not of pain, but of remembering, because silence, once it finds a place in your life, never truly disappears. It just softens with time. My brother and I talk now, not every day, but often enough to know that we're part of each other's lives again. Sometimes he calls first, sometimes I do. Our conversations aren't deep or emotional anymore. They're simple. We talk about his kids, about the weather, about what we had for dinner, and strangely, those small things mean more to me now than any grand apology ever could. Forgiveness doesn't always arrive with big words. Sometimes, it's found in the way you smile again, or in the quiet comfort of knowing someone hasn't completely disappeared from your heart. There are still moments when I catch myself wondering what life would have been like if things had never fallen apart, if we'd stayed close, if the silence had never come between us. But then I remind myself that even pain has its purpose. Sometimes distance teaches us what closeness really means. I used to think love was something you had to fight for, loud and desperate, but now I know it can also be gentle, patient, and silent. Love can wait. It doesn't need to shout. It just stays quietly until you're both ready to find it again. The years we lost can't come back, and that's okay. What matters is that we found our way home to each other. The road was long, but every lonely night, every unanswered message, every tear, they all led to this peace. I've learned that sometimes people walk away not because they stop loving you, but because they don't know how to stay. And when they finally return, it isn't the same love that left, it's a quieter, wiser one. Now, whenever I see siblings laughing together, I don't feel jealous anymore. I just feel grateful. Grateful that I know what it's like to lose someone and find them again. If there's one thing the silence taught me, it's this. Don't wait too long to speak your heart. Don't let pride be louder than love, because life is too short to stay quiet about the people who matter most.